They blamed me for everything: my family's ruin, my sister's death, even their own secrets. I was cast out, left to survive alone, and forced to build a new life from nothing. A decade later, they begged me to come back, not with apologies, but with desperate demands. What I uncovered in my childhood home shattered what was left of our family's lies, and made me realize just how far I'd come to reclaim my freedom. If you've ever been the scapegoat, this is the story they never want you to hear. When I was 9, my mother started calling me strange. She'd do it under her breath, usually when she thought I couldn't hear. Like when I'd walk into a room and she'd quickly hide her rosary. Or when something went wrong in the house, a mirror cracking, the dog getting sick, the power going out, and her eyes would immediately find mine. By 12, the word had evolved. Cursed. That one came from my father. I grew up in a small town where people still talked about signs and omens like they were facts. A crow on the porch meant death. Dreams of fire meant betrayal. A girl who didn't cry at her sister's funeral? That meant something evil was in her. The fire started the summer I turned 14. My younger sister, Emily, was asleep in her room upstairs. I had been watching TV in the living room. My parents were out, just a quick run to pick up groceries, they said. I smelled the smoke before I saw it, and by the time I ran upstairs, the heat had already sealed her door shut. I tried. God, I tried. I burned my hands on the doorknob and screamed for help until my throat gave out. But it was too late. Emily died in that fire. And from that moment on, I stopped being their daughter and became something else entirely. They didn't accuse me outright. Not at first. But the looks were enough. The silence. The way my father stopped saying my name. My mother wouldn't touch me, even by accident. And my older brother Caleb started calling me Ghost. Said I should have gone into the flames instead. Said it with a laugh, but never looked me in the eyes when he did. The basement became my room after that. Not officially, of course. But slowly, the signs were clear. My bedroom door was taken off its hinges after I slammed it once. My clothes were boxed up and moved for convenience. I was told it was quieter down there, that I'd have more space. The truth? They didn't want me near them. At school, I became the girl whose sister died and who didn't cry at the funeral. I heard what they whispered: she's cold. Probably did it. Something's not right with that one. Nobody saw the nightmares. The nights I clawed at my arms until they bled. The way I couldn't sleep unless the closet light was on. I begged my mom for therapy. She said, maybe if you prayed more, you wouldn't feel so sick in the head. By 16, I barely spoke. I kept my head down, did my chores, and counted the days. I figured if I could just make it to 18, I'd be free. But freedom wasn't something they planned to give me. Not even in silence. The breaking point came just after my 17th birthday. It was snowing. I remember that clearly. I'd accidentally knocked over a mug in the kitchen. It shattered. My father looked at the pieces, then at me, and said, "Everything you touch breaks." My mother didn't say anything. She just nodded. A week later, they sat me down and said I was going to stay with my Aunt Linda in Nebraska. Just for a while, my dad said. Fresh air, new environment. Maybe it'll help you. I didn't argue. Something inside me wanted to believe it was mercy. They put me on a Greyhound with a suitcase and a folded paper with an address. "She'll be there to pick you up," my mom said. But no one was. I stood outside that bus station for hours until it closed. A woman mopping the floor finally told me, "Honey, there ain't no Linda who lives around here." That's when I knew. They hadn't sent me away to help me. They'd gotten rid of me. I didn't cry that night. Not when I realized I was alone. Not even when my last $5 went to a vending machine meal that tasted like cardboard and regret. I sat in the corner of the bus station lobby until a security guard kicked me out. "No loitering," he said, like I was just another stray someone forgot to take home. It was February. Cold enough to burn. I had one jacket, thin and ripped at the cuffs, and a suitcase full of clothes that didn't match the weather. I walked until my feet blistered, hoping I'd find something, anything. I didn't even know what I was looking for. Maybe a sign. Maybe someone kind. What I found was a church with a red door and lights still on inside. I knocked. Nothing. I knocked again, harder. Finally, an old man opened the door. His name was Pastor Jim. He looked at me the way people usually didn't, like I wasn't broken yet. Just bruised. I told him everything. Or most of it. Enough. I expected him to tell me to call my parents, to go home. Instead, he handed me a blanket and let me sleep in the rec room downstairs. That was the first night in weeks I didn't dream of fire. For the next few months, I scrubbed toilets, vacuumed pews, and helped stock the food pantry. It wasn't much, but it was something. Pastor Jim gave me leftover bagels and small talks that didn't ask too much. I learned how to listen more than I spoke. Learned how to stay invisible and still be useful. Eventually, I got a job at a nearby motel, graveyard shift cleaning. The manager didn't ask for paperwork, just said, "Don't steal and don't talk back." I didn't do either. During the days, I slept in the church basement or stayed at the library, where it was warm and nobody cared how long you sat at a computer. I started reading. Then writing. Then, almost without thinking, I signed up for free online classes. I devoured everything I could find on psychology, trauma, grief. Not because I wanted to heal, but because I needed to make sense of myself. Of why people hurt you and still expect you to thank them for raising you. It wasn't easy. I failed 2 classes. Had panic attacks in bathroom stalls. Threw up before interviews. But I kept going. Like muscle memory. Like survival. By 22, I had a certification in grief counseling. By 24, I'd created a small online support group for women like me, exiles from their own bloodlines. The group exploded in 6 months. Stories poured in. Stories like mine, but worse. Stories that made me realize I wasn't alone. We called it the Phoenix Line. Because all of us had been burned down to ash. And still, here we were. I started recording short podcasts. Raw voice memos, mostly. Me talking into my phone at 2 a.m. about shame, about being the family scapegoat, about finding peace with people who would never say sorry. They went viral. Ted called. Then a publisher. My book, The Scapegoat Myth, How Families Rewrite History, became a quiet bestseller. I still remember the day it hit the top of the Amazon trauma list. I didn't celebrate. I just stared at the screen and thought, they said I was cursed. And now strangers were calling me healer. Then, exactly 10 years to the day after the fire, I got the letter. No return address. Just my name on the front, written in my mother's sharp, trembling script. Inside was one line. "We were wrong. We need your help. Your father is dying." I froze. The letter fell out of my hand like it had burned me. 3 days later, another envelope arrived. This time, it was from Caleb. "We can't survive without you. Please come back. We're still family." Family. That word had always sounded like glass in my mouth. But I held the letters for a long time. I didn't know what scared me more, that they wanted me back, or that some part of me wanted to go. I waited 2 weeks before answering. Every day, I'd pick up the letters, trace my mother's slanted handwriting, and try to imagine her voice without the bitterness. Sometimes I'd catch myself rehearsing what I'd say if I went back. The truth was, I didn't owe them anything, not a visit, not forgiveness, not a second of my peace. But I couldn't shake the feeling that unfinished business was pulling at me, like a splinter I'd never managed to dig out. I talked about it in therapy, half hoping for someone to talk me out of it. My counselor asked, "If you go, what would you want to happen?" I couldn't answer. Closure? Revenge? Or just proof that I'd survived them, that I was finally untouchable? I booked a ticket for a Friday in May. Told no one except my closest friend, who warned me, "Don't let them pull you under again." I promised her I wouldn't. I wanted to believe it. The drive from the airport back to my hometown felt like time traveling. The same broken-down barns, the same overgrown fields, the same sign on Main Street, "God sees all, repent now." I felt 12 again, small, watched, guilty for things I couldn't name. When I pulled into my parents' driveway, the house looked smaller than I remembered, and older. Paint peeling, porch sagging, weeds tall enough to swallow the mailbox. I half expected Emily to come running out the door, laughing at how long I'd been gone. My mother answered the door. She looked thinner, her hair gray and pulled back tight. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then she stepped aside. Inside, the house was a mausoleum. Dust on every surface, photos turned face down, a heavy, rotten sweetness in the air. My father was upstairs, bedridden. I heard him coughing through the ceiling, raw, wet, hopeless. Caleb arrived an hour later. He looked the same, only angrier. As soon as he saw me, he scoffed. "Didn't think you'd actually come," he said, arms crossed. I shrugged. I'd learned long ago not to react. We sat in the living room. My mother tried to make small talk, but it felt like a performance. She asked about my work on the internet, called me dear, with a voice that wobbled between regret and calculation. Finally she said, We need help, honey. The house. The medical bills. Your father's business is, well, things aren't good." She glanced at Caleb, who just glared at me. "I'm not here to save you," I said, my voice steady. "I came because I deserve the truth." That silenced them for a moment. Then my mother broke down, tears that didn't look real. She started talking about the fire, about how it ruined them. "We lost so much," she sobbed. "Emily she was the light. You know that." I waited. I wanted her to say it. To say what they'd done. But she didn't. Instead, she asked me to talk to my father. "He might not last the week." I agreed. Not for them, but for myself. I needed to see if the man who'd called me cursed could even look me in the eye. Upstairs, the air was thick with the smell of sickness and old anger. My father looked at me, his eyes dull but sharp around the edges. He didn't speak at first. When he did, all he said was, "Did you come back to watch me die?" I stared at him. "No. I came back for answers." He closed his eyes, turned away. "There are no answers. Only what you carry with you." I left the room. The door clicked softly shut behind me, and I realized, whatever answers I wanted, they were never going to give them to me freely. That night, I lay awake in the old basement, the place they used to exile me. Nothing had changed: the single dangling bulb, the scratchy blanket, the dampness that clung to everything. It was as if the universe wanted to remind me exactly where I stood in this house. Sleep didn't come. I kept thinking about Emily, her tiny, crooked grin, the way she'd sneak down here with cookies and whisper, "You're not a ghost, you're a ninja." I hadn't realized how much I'd needed to hear that until it was gone forever. The next morning, the town grapevine was already humming. Word travels fast in small places, especially when the cursed daughter comes back from the dead. I saw it in the grocery clerk's forced smile, the way an old neighbor peered over his fence as I walked by, the barely masked curiosity at the pharmacy when I picked up my father's medication. I tried to ignore it. I kept my head down, did what was asked. I cooked, cleaned, managed bills, fielded phone calls from debt collectors who spoke to me like I was the last adult standing. But as the days went by, things started to slip through the cracks. One afternoon, while sorting through my parents' paperwork, I found a court notice wedged in a pile of junk mail. Their house was about to be seized, foreclosure, final warning. Next to it was a letter stamped urgent. My father's old business partner was suing for unpaid debts. They were drowning, and the only thing left to cling to was the daughter they'd thrown away. That night, Caleb cornered me in the kitchen. He didn't ask how I was. He just went straight to, "You have money. You've got that book deal, right? Mom says you owe us." I looked at him for a long time. "I owe you nothing," I said quietly. He scoffed. "You wouldn't have survived without us. Don't pretend you got here on your own. My hands shook, but my voice didn't. You left me at a bus station. You never even checked if I made it. He looked away, jaw tight, but didn't deny it. A few days later, my mother finally snapped. I found her in the living room, clutching a framed photo of Emily, rocking back and forth. When she saw me, her face twisted. Why couldn't it have been you? She whispered. Why are you the one who always survives? I felt the old ache, the guilt that had eaten me alive for years. But this time, I didn't apologize. I just said, I don't know, Mom. Maybe you should ask yourself that. That afternoon, I visited Emily's grave. It was covered in weeds, the headstone chipped and faded. I sat in the grass and talked to her like she was listening. I wish I could have saved you, I whispered. But I can't save them. Not anymore. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of cut grass and distant smoke. I realized I was shaking, but it wasn't from fear. It was relief. Later, when I returned to the house, I found Caleb going through my suitcase. He looked up, caught, furious. Get out of my stuff, I snapped. He just sneered. What are you hiding? More secrets? I slammed the door behind him and locked it, heart racing. For the first time, I understood, I wasn't the one with the secrets. They were. And I was finally ready to find out the truth. I started digging. Not to help them, but to help myself, to finally see how deep their lies went. The next morning, while my mother was at the hospital and Caleb was job hunting, which I suspected meant sulking at the bar, I went through the filing cabinet in my father's study. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Buried under tax forms and old bank statements was a folder labeled Emily. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were newspaper clippings about the fire, police reports, and, at the very bottom, a crumpled page with my name on it. It was a statement my father had given the night Emily died. He told the officers that I had been acting strangely 4 days, that I was jealous of my sister's closeness with our parents, that I liked to play with matches. Reading those words felt like being set on fire all over again. I'd never lit a match in my life. There was more, a letter from our insurance company denying the claim, citing suspicious circumstances and unresolved questions about the fire's cause. I remembered overhearing angry conversations about money, how tight things had been even before the tragedy. I flipped through more papers, piecing together a story I'd never been told. My parents' business had been in trouble for years, long before the fire. They'd taken out loans, borrowed from friends, mortgaged the house twice. The fire hadn't just destroyed Emily's room, it had destroyed the last illusion of stability in our family. I found an envelope addressed to my father from my mother, dated 3 weeks after the fire. Inside was a note in her handwriting. We have to keep the story straight. No more doubts. If anyone asks, she was sleepwalking again. I sat back, dizzy, clutching the envelope. They'd been building a narrative from the start, casting me as the unreliable one, the scapegoat. It wasn't superstition. It was self-preservation. When my mother came home, I confronted her. I laid the papers on the kitchen table and watched her face go pale. You lied, I said. You lied to everyone. You let them think I was dangerous. She sank into a chair, head in her hands. For a moment, she looked so small I almost felt sorry for her. We didn't know what to do, she whispered. We couldn't face it. Your father, he left the candle burning that night. He always did for Emily, so she wouldn't be afraid. He forgot. It was an accident. My heart slammed in my chest. All those years they'd known. They'd known, and they'd let me carry the weight. Why? I demanded. Why didn't you ever tell the truth? She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. We couldn't. The town, your father's business, we would have lost everything. I realized then that I'd been sacrificed to protect their pride, their reputation. Not because I was cursed, but because I was convenient. Later that night, I sat alone on the back porch, staring up at a sky I hadn't seen in a decade. I felt the old ache of grief, but it was softer now. I wasn't angry. I was empty, and for the first time, that emptiness felt like freedom. The days after my discovery blurred together. My father's condition worsened, and the house grew heavier with grief and dread. I watched my mother and Caleb scramble, clinging to routines, making coffee, straightening pillows, obsessively checking the mailbox as if a miracle might arrive. I stayed out of the way, spending hours on the porch, or wandering the woods behind our property, searching for some sign of Emily, or maybe of the person I used to be. My father died late on a Sunday afternoon. The nurse had just left, and I was in the kitchen washing dishes when I heard my mother scream. Caleb rushed past me, nearly knocking me into the counter. I didn't follow. I waited until it was quiet again, until I heard my mother's muffled sobs and Caleb's low, furious muttering. The only feeling I had was relief that I'd never have to hear my father's voice again. The funeral was small, mostly out of necessity. Few people in town wanted to be seen supporting my family, not after the foreclosure notice and the lawsuit became public. I stood in the back, a stranger in my own bloodline, watching my mother weep and Caleb try to look stoic. I didn't cry. I couldn't. It felt like mourning a story, not a man. After the service, Caleb pulled me aside behind the church. His face was raw with desperation. "Don't leave," he said. "We need you. Mom's a mess. The house." He stopped, choking on the words. "I know we were hard on you. But you're still family. You can help us fix this." There was a time when those words would have gutted me. Now they felt empty, like the hollow echo in the basement where I'd spent all those lonely nights. I looked at him, really looked at him, my brother, older now, but still trapped in the same patterns, the same need for someone else to take the blame. "I can't fix what you broke," I said softly. "You need to learn to live with your own choices." He tried again, anger flaring. "So you're just going to walk away? After everything? I survived you once. I don't owe you another rescue." Inside the church, people gathered for the reception. I slipped away, feeling lighter with every step. That night, I wrote a check, a sizable donation, to the local women's shelter, in my father's name. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was the closest I could get to peace. I left the envelope at the church, knowing my family would never see it, never know about it, never be able to twist it into something for themselves. Back at the house, I packed my things. My mother watched from the doorway, face streaked with tears, silent and unmoving. I met her gaze for a long moment. "I hope someday you find your own way out," I said. "But I can't lead you there." I walked away from that house, from the cemetery, from the town that had never been mine. I didn't look back. For the first time in my life, I felt whole, scarred, yes, but whole. I drove out of that town as the sun was rising, the highway stretching empty in front of me. I watched the fields slide past, every mile putting more distance between me and the ghosts I'd carried for so long. The radio played static and then, out of nowhere, an old song Emily used to hum. I let it play. I let myself remember her, not just how she died, but how she made me laugh, the way she made me feel seen. Back in the city, my life was waiting, my apartment, my friends, the work I'd built from the ground up. For the first few days, I drifted through it all, untethered, half expecting some part of my old life to reach out and pull me back. But nothing came. The silence felt different now, not emptiness, but possibility. I started hearing from people, members of the Phoenix line, survivors who'd read my book or watched my talk. Some wrote to say they'd left their families too, others just wanted to be heard, to be believed. Every story felt like a piece of my own, scattered and rearranged in 1,000 different voices. I gave a eulogy for my father in my own way, not at the funeral, but on a podcast episode weeks later. I spoke about the legacy of silence, of shame, of what it costs to be the one left holding the blame. I told them I'd come home to find closure, but what I found was peace, and that sometimes, peace means letting go, even when you're the only one willing to do it. I donated my father's old toolbox to a community center and left a copy of my book in the town library, unsigned. I didn't care if anyone recognized my name. I didn't need their forgiveness or their understanding. I had given enough. On my last night in that town, before I left for good, I stood outside Emily's grave one final time. I placed a single wildflower on her stone and whispered, "I'm sorry you never got to leave. I'm living for both of us now." As I walked away, I realized I wasn't cursed. I was sacrificed. And I won't be again.